My name's Dina Barakat.
Sunny Rajwan.
Lauren Tintoni.
Farheen Lakhani.
My name is David Aspinall.
I am undecided.
I don't know who to vote for.
I am an undecided voter.
What do I care about?
The increase in cost of living for families like mine.
The most important issue to me is our place on the global stage.
I'm upset with the way that digital companies operate and behave in this country.
I have questions.
I need answers.
I vote because that's my right and that's my responsibility as a Canadian.
This is my time.
It's my turn.
Here we are again in the National Studio in Toronto. As you know, all week we've been doing this new, different thing. We promised the election would be about you, the voters, about your questions, your concerns. So we are giving over as much of our interview time to the federal leaders, to you, the voters. Welcome to our final night of Face-to-Face with the federal leaders. I'm Rosemary Barton. In our studio, once again, undecided voters looking for answers ahead of the upcoming election. We've invited 5 of those voters to speak one-on-one with the leaders. By now, you might understand the concept if you've been watching through the week. They get 5 minutes. I don't interrupt until the 5 minutes is over, and then I can jump in and maybe help get some other answers or fact check some stuff or whatever we think we need. And joining us for our final day here, Jagmeet Singh, leader of the NDP. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Of course, we've already seen Justin Trudeau, Andrew Scheer, and Elizabeth May, and you're our last guest. Thanks for making the time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So just so everybody knows at home, we gave you the first name of these lovely questioners, their hometown, general topic, but otherwise you're on your own. All right. Those are the terms. Each participant gave us a quick video that they shot to introduce themselves to all of you. So let's start the clock. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Lauren Tintoni. I'm married to an Italian immigrant and we have a 3.5-year-old son. My biggest concern is childcare. That's because as a small business owner, I was never given a penny for mat leave, and since I couldn't afford childcare, I had to bring my baby to work with me. I would love to give my son a sibling, but we haven't been able to because we can't afford the high cost of childcare. I don't know who I'm going to vote for because politicians make so many empty promises. I'm wondering, where is the money going to come from to fix this childcare problem?
All right, Lauren, over to you.
Okay. So basically, that's my biggest question. Where is the money going to come from to fix the childcare crisis?
And it's a big concern for you because I know it's a big concern for so many people that I meet. This is something, if you think it's worth doing, I really want to do it. Maybe tell me a little bit how important it is to you.
Well, I'm a mom and I'd love to have a second child and I can't afford it. So this is a huge crisis that's plaguing moms all over Canada.
So
How are you going to fix it?
Yeah.
Where is the money coming from?
So I think, first of all, if it's something is a priority, we see governments get it done. Like, so last year...
Well, where is the money coming from?
Well,
Sorry to cut you off.
No, not at all. I'll give you an example. So last year, the Liberal government chose to give $14 billion away to the wealthiest corporations to buy limos and corporate jets.
But that's not relevant to my question. Sorry to cut you off again. Where is the money coming from? This $10 billion, where is it coming from?
So mine is coming from different choices. So we wouldn't choose to give billions to billionaires. We'd give it to childcare. We'd invest in childcare. The second thing we do is, so we have limited resources. We take it very seriously. We make better decisions. So one is we choose to give to people, not to billionaires. The second thing is we'd ask for more revenue. So the revenue that we're going to look at is the wealthiest in our country don't pay their fair share. So there's offshore tax havens that are $23 billion that we're losing.
I'm going to have to cut you off again. I'm sorry. I'm just wondering where specifically you are going to find this money and then where you're going to put it.
I'm telling you that, I think. I'm saying that there's $23 billion of offshore tax havens that we're going to clamp down on and use those investments in things like childcare.
Okay.
We're going to ask the super wealthy to pay a wealth tax. So those who have wealth of over $20 million, we're going to ask them to pay 1% on that. The PBO has said that would be a $70 billion investment in new revenue. So we're going to ask the wealthiest in Canada to help invest in these programs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that means that... Okay. So that means that the cost of living for the middle class and lower income, it's not going to increase.
Not at all. This is only, we look at who's not paying their fair share. Middle class families, lower income families are certainly paying their fair share. They don't have access to offshore tax havens. They don't have access to CEO stock option loopholes. But those loopholes that exist have to be clamped down on. One concrete example is the CEO stock option loophole could raise as much as $1 billion of new revenue. Mr. Trudeau promised to do it in 2015. 4 years later, he hasn't done it. And to me, it looks like again and again, governments work for the richest. They don't work for families that need help, families like you. And I want to make sure we change that. I'm in it for you. I want to fight for you.
Another question. I'm just curious about how, because the cost of living is just going up and up and up. And is there going to be a way to reduce it, to reverse it? Because I went grocery shopping the other day and a stick of butter was $7. So how are we going to move forward by reducing some of these prices?
So I hear you on that. Like, life is getting super expensive. And I speak to people all the time that tell me how tough it is because salaries aren't going up, but the costs are going up. And it's really frustrating. So I look at what we can do at the federal level. There's a bunch of things we can do. One is we know that the cost of healthcare is going up. Medications cost more and more. We want to put in place a universal Medicare program, a pharmacare program for all. So the medication costs, that would save families about $600 at a minimum per year. For some families, that would mean thousands of dollars of savings. We want to put in place a dental care program, which would save families, on average, families of four, $1,200 a year. So that's a dental care program that we could put in right away in 1 year. That would save families lots of money.
Do you think you're going to be able to, though, adjust our everyday lives, the cost of living in our everyday lives? Everything is so expensive.
It feels like it's kind of rigged against people a bit, right?
It does. I mean, it feels like the minimum wage went up, which is excellent, but at the same time, all of the prices skyrocketed. So people started earning more, but spending more.
Well, I think that the economy is rigged. I've been hearing that from people, where it's rigged that people at the very top, they're doing great. You know, the billionaires and multimillionaires are enjoying life. But for everyone else, life is getting harder and harder. I want to make the economy work better for people. That means putting in place services and programs. So childcare that you talk about, our plan is to put in place a childcare that's going to save thousands and thousands of dollars for families. Money that could be used for things like, you know, groceries or to pay the bills. And so for us, it's a commitment. We're not going to back down from this. Mr. Trudeau gave up on it. I'm not giving up on it. I believe in it. I believe in national, universal, affordable childcare for everyone. And we're going to make that happen.
That's it. Good job, Lauren. That's really expensive butter, though. I had never seen $7 butter.
I should have said that too, yeah.
Yeah, no.
I'm going to ask a couple of questions, if that's okay. So you want to create a universal childcare plan by 2030. You say within the first 4 years, you can create 500,000 spaces. It'll cost about $10 billion. However, in your plan, you also say that you're going to do this with the provinces. Are the provinces going to have to contribute to that plan?
So what we're proposing is we put up our $10 billion and we work with provinces, and we have to work with them to deliver these programs. But what we're saying is we're committed to it. We're not going to back down.
But does work with mean that they have to also pony up some money?
They do have to contribute as well, for sure.
Do you have a number for that?
We're prepared to put in $10 billion, and we'll work with provinces to see what they're able to do. It's going to be different for each province, but we're ready to work with provinces because we believe childcare is essential. We need to have childcare. We need to make sure it's affordable. And we need it because it's going to make a massive difference in so many families' lives.
What about provinces that already have affordable childcare, like Quebec, for instance? Would you give them the money anyway? How would it work?
Yeah, so we'd have to figure that in. I mean, BC also has a pilot project that they're working on. So we'd recognize provinces that have taken steps or are taking steps, and that would factor into our investments.
You consistently say, and you said it again already today, that the Liberal government gave $14 billion to corporations to buy limousines and private jets. That is not, in fact, what they gave them the money for. It was a response to a huge tax reform that happened in the United States. It is for capital investment to buy new machinery and equipment for companies, and that generally creates more jobs and helps workers. So are you saying to me that you would not help companies with capital investment when they are having to compete with massive tax reform in the United States?
Well, Rosie, you know that in that $14 billion corporate tax giveaway that cost us $14 billion, they specifically included corporate jets and limousines as capital investment.
Yes, but it's disingenuous to say that that's what it's for. It's also for equipment and large machinery that companies need in order to work.
What they've done is do exactly what Mr. Harper's done in the past, which is to give a blank check to corporations. There's no commitment that it has to create jobs. There's no requirement that it has to invest in direct job creation. So that's basically a blank check. And the point of saying
you would cancel that kind of
I don't believe in blank checks. Absolutely, I would cancel that.
Would you give them $14 billion if they made a commitment for job creation?
Now, job creation is a different type of investment. I wouldn't give $14 billion away to a corporation, which includes a whole list of measures, which include the ability to buy corporate jets as one of them. There's no restriction. It doesn't say that they have to invest in a factory or they have to invest in a worker. They can do whatever they want. To me, that's a blank check. And no, I would never give blank checks to corporations.
But do you
I would
understand-
ensure
but
that
do
they're
you
investing in
understand that
people.
corporations drive growth and productivity in the country?
Do you understand that?
But that's what they're trying to spark by giving them that option.
But do you understand that when we give blank checks to corporations, they can just walk away? I grew up in Windsor. I grew up in southwestern Ontario. And I've seen what happens when you give billion-dollar giveaways to corporations. They can close down their shops and leave people stranded. And they've done that before. That's wrong.
Okay, we'll move on. Move on to our next voter. Here's a little bit about Dina.
Hi, Dina Barakat. I graduated in international business law. I am originally from Sudan. I got my citizenship a few weeks ago, so I am a first-time voter. I am very interested in the party's agenda in regards to their foreign affairs policy. I would like to know what their strategy is to ensure our presence internationally is regarded to a higher standard than it is today.
Awesome. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Over to you, Dina.
Thank you. So I've heard what you're intending to do on a national level, but on the flip side of the coin, if you're elected into office, you've got to represent us internationally. And some of the items on your agenda that's mentioned, and that you've mentioned during your campaign, canceling our arms trade deal, standing up to Trump, and the situation that's being given to you with our relationship with China. You say it's courageous leadership that's needed. We already know that these countries and a lot of the countries globally will retaliate if you stand up to them, if you cancel contracts. So I'd like to know, what's your strategy? Like, what's your plan should you be elected into office tomorrow?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's tough to make decisions like that. I mean, I can give you the arms deal example. Basically, I don't think it makes any sense that Canada is selling weapons to a country like Saudi Arabia. When Saudi Arabia has been implicated in the killing of a journalist, they've been implicated or they're involved in a killing of people in Yemen, and the human rights track record of that country with respect to its own people is so horrible.
And I agree, like I'm with you in the sense of
I
like,
feel
let's
like that.
cancel all arms deals, but how are you going to handle, that's a very powerful player on the global stage. That's the leader of the Islamic world. How are you going to handle the retaliation that can come from them or from their allies, and also honor the commitments of what you're saying you want to do internationally as Canada, as the consensus builder, which I believe is Canada's role so far, because you do need their support to be able to go into these countries and increase women's rights or women's education. It's a delicate balance.
No, I
What's
hear
your
you.
plan? If you cancel that arms deal and they retaliate, one, we're sending a message to the world that our current leaders can cancel agreements which our previous leaders entered into. It's ethically.
Well, there's a criteria that we have. The criteria is that we can look at the human rights track record of a country, particularly in the sales of weapons, and we can evaluate whether weapons should go there or not. And in this
We've already
case,
signed the contract.
but we have the ability to say, given all the information we have now, given the recent events like the killing of a journalist and the implication in that, I mean, I can't think of, if we've got the criteria that exists for us to say we're not going to sell arms to a country, I can't think of any other example. When would we ever then say no?
You can cancel the agreement, but my question is, how are you going to deal with the retaliation that's going to come to Canada and it's going to impact our economy?
We have to, I believe if we want to be leaders in the world, we have to take a strong stance.
So what are the steps you're going to do to handle that retaliation? We've already gotten hit from China. That's a global economic leader that we
we'd be
need to
very clear,
build increase our relationships with, just to be smart and bring money into Canada.
So with this one example, what I would say is that this is our position. I'd be very clear on why we're taking the position. Given these three really important things that have happened, I've made this decision. And I would communicate that decision very clearly and say, this is very troubling, this is very wrong, and I communicate that clearly and take a firm stance.
So what's your mitigation? So for me, if you plan to do something like that, you've analyzed the risks and you have some mitigation plans in place to handle the retaliation that's going to come. We know today, like the global platform has changed. There's lack of civility. These countries come from very different cultures and very different backgrounds. They don't care about democracy. The leading representation of democracy, the US themselves are taking a different stance.
So people expect us to stand up, and I think that standing up will have its repercussions, but I'm ready to handle those. So if it means standing up, so whatever may come our way, I'll say I defend my position. I've made a position based on principles.
So you will take a hit to the economy to stand up, because it's a delicate balance. You're going to affect our Canadian economy.
Yeah, we have got to have principles, though. We have to have values. And if we can sell weapons to a country that does all these things, I would stand up for it.
So have you factored all of that into the money you're trying to, or what you're trying to do nationally?
Last one there, my friend.
So what I would do is, with respect to the deal itself, I've said that we have a lot of needs in Canada. Our armed forces have a lot of needs. We could continue those jobs and make sure those jobs continue by ensuring that the equipment is provided to arms, to services that we need here in Canada.
Okay.
Of course.
Dina, how do you feel about those answers?
I still don't know what our plan is, how we're going to handle retaliation, which is a huge risk that we're taking, and it is going to affect our economy. It's a delicate balance. I do understand that, but for somebody who's going to represent us, I would like to know that you're ready to handle that. We don't have much leverage. We don't have the military. We don't have we don't have much leverage, like political terms. We don't have the stick or the carrot. So what are we going to do?
We just don't sell weapons to a country like that, and we can negotiate
other people. We're standing up to.
You keep saying that the NDP will stand up to Donald Trump. So this is sort of in line with what you're saying. How do you stand? What does that look like? What do you do to stand up to Donald Trump?
So we don't jump to ratify a deal that the Democrats in the states themselves are fighting to improve. I don't see why there's a rush. If we know that in Congress it's being held up, why would Mr. Trudeau then say we've got to quickly move ahead with it when we know it's not going to be approved yet? I'd say let's negotiate to make sure that the protections that are in place are actually enforceable. So right now there's a chapter on environmental and labor protections. None of it is enforceable. So how does that help out a Canadian worker? Yeah, I'd say we've got to be strong and say we're not going to ratify a deal until there's protections in place. Well, and it turns out that Democrats in the South are actually doing that.
So you would want to restart negotiations on NAFTA?
Well, I said very clearly, the first step I would do is make sure that the protections that are in place are actually enforceable. Without the enforcement, they're meaningless protections.
But you would have to negotiate that.
We'd have to negotiate that.
Right. So you would open it up again.
I would say we'd not ratify until there's some protections in place. I'd support the work that's being done in the States right now by progressives who are saying we should put some protections in place to ensure that our environment and our workers are actually getting a fair deal. And that means they can compete at a fair level.
You have also, I'm not clear where you are on this right now, but you joked that you hoped Donald Trump would get impeached before you speak to him.
I wasn't joking.
And then you said it wasn't a joke. And then the next day you said it wasn't a joke. So that's where I was going.
Oh,
do you think
I stole the punchline on that one.
Do you think that that kind of comment is appropriate for someone who might be sitting across a table from our biggest trading partner and someone who you are going to have some sort of professional relationship with? Is that an appropriate comment on the president and a domestic process?
Well, I grew up with this belief that, if you got good friends, you can have a good conversation with them, but you also got to call them out when they're wrong. It's wrong to strip kids from their mom's arms. It's wrong to put kids in cages. It's wrong what he's doing.
Right. But it's different to make a comment on a policy decision and where you sit on the issue versus the United States. And then it's another thing to say that you agree the U.S. president should be impeached. You know that he reacts abruptly to things, right? So I just wonder, when you meet him for the first time and he knows that you've said that about him, how would that change the nature of your relationship? Because it would have to.
Well, in my experience, when you've got someone who's a bully, that does a lot of bullying tactics, they certainly don't respect you if you're weak. They certainly don't respect you if you don't stand up to them. My only experience in life has been, if you've got a bully, you've got to stand up to them, and that's what I would do.
Okay. All right, Dina. I should say Dina just recently became a citizen, and it's
hey,
going to be her first time voting.
That's awesome.
Okay, let's move on to our next questioner. Watch this.
Hi, my name is Sunny Rajwan, and I'm from Abbotsford, British Columbia. I'm married and father to one child with another one on the way. I currently work as a financial analyst in the public service sector. The main concern for me in this election cycle is increase in cost of living for average Canadian families just like my own. It's becoming increasingly harder to buy a home and to pay for living expenses. Even though that the parties are promising to pay for social spending and social programs to make it more affordable to live in Canada, My concern is none of these parties are really talking about how they're going to pay for this spending. Will affordability in the future be worse off for me and my fellow Canadians by paying higher taxes? Or will Canada just rack up more debt and burdening my children's generation to pay for the spending that we're doing today?
Go ahead, Sunny.
Hi, Jagmeet.
Hey.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you,
So
son.
as you saw from the video, the concern is cost of living going up. So I live in the Lower Mainland, notorious for expensive housing,
Totally.
expensive gas,
Yep.
which causes other goods and services to be more and more expensive, like groceries or just household goods that a family like mine would need. It's good to see that the NDP is coming around now and saying, hey guys, we'll give you $9 billion in National Dental Care Program, a few $1 billion spent on the National Pharmacare Program, right? $150 billion on greenifying or the transport, right? $30 million to BC Ferries, so mainlanders can go to the island and back and forth a lot cheaper. Great. Families like mine need that. Affordability is already hard, right? How do I know, or how do we know how the NDP is going to pay for billions and billions and billions of promises over and above what we already have? How are you guys going to cost it?
Yeah, so so some of them you're close on, the 30 million to the ferries, bang on. Some of them, just a quick clarification. For the dental program, it would cost 856 million a year for it to be running. There'd be a bump up in 1 year, but that would be the ongoing cost
That's
of it.
fair. That's the timeline of the monies. But how are you going to fund it?
Fund it, yeah. So what we do is, I just want to give you a quick example of what Mr. Trudeau spent money on, just to give you an example of what we can spend money on. So last year, he made the following spending commitments. $14 billion tax giveaway that we talked about earlier. He bought a pipeline for $4.5 billion. And he waived $6 billion in corporate loans. So that's just 1 year's spending. He effectively spent close to $25 billion in spending commitments.
So then can you say...
I wouldn't make those decisions.
So
I'd make different decisions. I wouldn't give... All that $25 billion went to the wealthiest Canadians. Didn't go to actual people like you, families that need it.
So in a sense, what I'm kind of hearing is what I've thought about is these promises in the NDP platform, you're really kind of funding it on the backs of the corporations and the super rich.
Absolutely. So first is these choice. First, I'll give you two quick things, then you come right back at me. So first is the choices. The choices, we make different choices, and then yes, in addition to that, we'd actually increase revenue on the super rich, as well as the wealthiest.
Okay, so that means you won't raise my taxes.
Not at all.
Not at all. Not 1%.
Not 1%.
And you won't rack up any more debt.
No. Well, our plan is this. Well, we're not afraid to make investments in people to ensure that we deliver programs. So we're not afraid of that, but we're confident that the decisions we're making are going to actually increase revenue and make better choices with the revenue that we have so that we invest in people, not in going to debt to give billionaires more billions.
Fair enough. But what you just said concerns me even more now. Right? Because the last time I checked, we work in a capitalist economy, right? The rich want to get richer every day, right? Corporations are in for the bottom line. Corporations employ the middle class, right? Like myself. If you jack up the taxes even more on them, sure, they'll pay it, but down the road, they'll say, hey, we're leaving. We're going to go to a better tax jurisdiction, like let's say the US, and we're going to cut jobs. We're out the door, right? Then I'm scared that Mr. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP are going to show up at my door and say, hey, remember all those promises you gave us? Right? Pay up for them now, right? And then, hey, maybe
not gonna happen. I'll tell you why, though.
Right, but the thing is, it's kind of playing Robin Hood in a way, right? Taking from the rich, giving it to us.
I believe in that.
Right?
I believe in taking from the rich, for sure.
But we're not a socialist economy. The corporations aren't in it to play a charity game, right?
But I think they should pay their fair share.
They should be, but that's not how economics works, right?
I'll give you a couple examples, though. So for a 1% on the wealthiest, so those who've got wealth of over 20 million, we want to put a 1% tax in place. So people ask, why 1%? Why not 5? Why not 10? The 1% is because we found the PBO costed this out. They said it would cost more for people to move their money than to keep it in their jurisdiction. So that's why we kept it at 1%. So we're on top of that. We don't want them to be able to move it around.
I'm going to move on to my next question. I'm a big believer in the science behind the climate change. We need to do something about the climate right now. We're going to reach levels of carbon emissions where it's going to be impossible for us to reverse. The children are going to suffer, and I don't want them fighting for resources like water or energy. We need to save the planet, and that's the term, but we really need to do something now.
I agree.
On the flip side of that, I was in Calgary during the oil downturn. I was affected deeply. We just had a baby, bought a house, worked my butt off to buy the house, lost my job, wife lost her job, in-laws in Edmonton are all hurting, friends in Calgary have lost their jobs. Your stance on the pipeline is a hard no. A hard no shows me that you're turning your back on those Canadians. That's what it feels like. Why doesn't the NDP just phase off the pipeline versus, nope, too bad, so sad, we're going to go green? Are you going there because that's where the votes are and that's a hot topic right now? or why not phase off and help the Canadians that are suffering? Because that's what the NDP is about, isn't it?
Sure, sure. I don't know if the votes are there or not, to be honest with you, because people will say polling goes this way and that way. It's not really clear. I just know as a value, to me, it doesn't make sense to put the whole coastline at risk, the Indigenous communities that are, their rights are being infringed on. Right. It's diluted bitumen, and we don't know how to clean it up if there's an oil spill. So for various reasons, I've said no to that project. But I want to say yes to workers, because I know what you're going through. I've heard the same stories from so many people. Right. And I know this hasn't just happened now. In the past, in Edmonton, I have a friend, I was friends since 20 years ago. Right. And the same thing happened back then. That busts and booms happen again and again. And workers can work so hard, no matter how hard they work, they go through periods where they lose everything and they gain everything.
But this time, everybody's saying, forget the pipeline, forget it. Too bad, right?
No, but what I want to do is our plan to fight the climate crisis is a jobs plan as well, because we cannot ever forget workers. So what we're committed to doing is this. Workers should not have to have an economy that's so volatile, that's so unpredictable. I want to give more stability and more predictability.
How are you going to do that?
So there's a whole host of measures. We want to make investments in clean energy. We want to make investments in retrofits. Right. We want to put all the skills and talents that we have to an opportunity where they can create long-term jobs. Right. We can do that.
Just to be clear for Sunny, though, with the expansion of the TMX pipeline, the part of it that we already own, the old pipeline, what do you do with that? Do you try and sell it? Do we keep it? And then do you continue with the expansion?
So no to the expansion. That's been my clear position on that. With respect to, so I want to make sure there's transitions in place and supports in place for workers. We've got a whole host of measures for that. Changes to EI, changes to support people for training, for opportunities for work, and injecting in 300,000 clean jobs.
But do you sell the part that we already own?
The part that we already own, what I would do is to do an analysis, a forensic analysis of what we actually have to understand what the asset's worth. I don't have the details. I don't know what it's exactly worth right now and what's the best decision to do with that. But I can make it clear, my investments in the future would go towards clean energy. I would end fossil fuel subsidies right away and invest in renewable energy.
So that I'm glad you brought up the fossil fuel subsidies, because there's also been subsidies to the LNG project, $275 million. It's a project that you've supported in the past. Why are you okay with subsidizing that project and not fossil fuel subsidies?
So my principle is this. Day one of a new Democratic government, I end all fossil fuel subsidies. And I don't want to spend any extra money on any fossil fuel company. So if there's penalties, I want to make sure I'm spending the least amount so that there's no public money going towards fossil fuel sectors.
What about liquefied natural gas? Why are you comfortable with that?
I'm not comfortable with any form of carbon. The future of our planet has to be a planet where we're not using carbon for fuel.
So why not cancel those subsidies then?
So that's what I'm saying. What I would do immediately with our federal powers is to end all subsidies to any
including this LNG project in British Columbia.
So to any fossil fuel sector, and I would look at if there's penalties in place. I certainly don't want to pay more billions to a company on penalties.
Okay, Sonny wants 5 more questions. He's not getting them, though. Here's our next voter. Watch this.
Sorry, man.
My name is David Aspinall. I'm married with 2 daughters at university. I live in Montreal. Together with my wife, we own and operate an internet business, and we contribute a lot to the local fabric in terms of jobs and opportunities for people in our neighborhood. I'm undecided as a voter because I haven't yet heard from the leaders of the political parties a clear vision about how they're going to deal with the challenges related to new technologies.
Okay.
All right, David.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm from Montreal, and I own a business together with my wife.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and we started it. My wife started the business 15 years ago from our basement.
Congrats.
That's we never took money from government. We did everything on our own, and it's tough because today digital technologies are getting increasingly, down to the few players that really control and shape what's going on. So, I have some reservations about that and some concerns. And unfortunately, I think our government has been asleep at the switch, and they haven't really considered, beyond tax issues, which is a real problem. They haven't considered the impact on small businesses as well as larger businesses. So, you just need to go to any mall and you'll see how many vacant spaces there are.
Right.
And you're just waiting for the next, shoe to drop because there's going to be another bankruptcy because Amazon has essentially wiped out this
another
business.
Yeah.
But my concern isn't just about how these companies are robbing from our country's treasury.
Right.
I'm worried about how they're robbing our resources, how they're robbing consumers, and nobody's actually kind of even thinking about that. So The fact that this is just coming up on the campaign trail tells me that we're behind the curve. Because, in the United States, just a couple of days ago, they've announced that they're going to be bringing Amazon and Google in to hear testimony about how they're affecting small businesses.
Right.
But in Canada, there's nothing like that. So as a leader of the party and as a leader of government, would you, in fact, consider having some form of council or committee that would consider the impacts on Canadian businesses?
What I think, so the taxation question isn't just a matter of revenue, it's also a matter of competition. So Canada has lost out because web giants effectively operate without any taxation, without any restrictions, and it's really been an incentive. It's been a subsidy of Facebook, Google, and Netflix. Effectively, Canada has subsidized these companies because they don't have the same taxation laws apply to them. So by being subsidized, they've gotten ahead of traditional media. So we've lost out in culture, we've lost out in investments in our local media because Canada, Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Harper before him, have been basically giving away billions of dollars to these other companies that have been taking that as an advantage and then have run with it. So I think it's created more wealth concentrated into fewer hands, hurt local businesses, local opportunities like yours to continue and grow. So I think that's a massive problem.
David, I'm going to give you a short follow-up if you want.
Yeah, and so
No,
maybe...
I think that's absolutely correct. And, I think tax is an issue. It's a very important issue. And I don't think that they should have their way with every country that they're in and everybody's standing up. But I think Canada has been really complacent. And I think they really need to get onto this. And it's not just about the tax dollars. It's about the jobs. It's about the resources. It's the way that they're crushing businesses. And, we cannot wait for somebody else to give us a model or a strategy.
Right.
So what I haven't yet heard is, would you commit, for example, to have some form of commission that would look at this?
Yes.
To stimulate job growth, to actually develop some resources locally?
Yes, absolutely. So what we do is, I think that with the new advent of technology and e-commerce and the consolidation of power basically in a couple of handful of web giants, it's hurt all of the forms of competition. So I would look at what the impact has been on giving them that massive subsidy and how that's hurt businesses and how we can actually support local businesses growing. I think we absolutely need to have that conversation, and I'd be committed to making decisions that benefit small businesses over these powerful web giants.
Okay.
I'm absolutely committed to that.
I'll insert myself if I can, David. So just to be clear, you also have a plan to tax the digital giants, the same as the Liberals. Is it a different level of taxation? Is it the same idea?
It's they should be on the exact same level playing field. What the Liberal governments are proposing is just a kind of a general couple percentage point tax. I'm saying whatever a local player would have to do, that is what a web giant should have to do.
Your large business corporate tax rate.
Exactly. They should be paying the exact same amount. There's also an exemption now if you advertise, if you're a company and you advertise through one of the web giants, essentially there's a loophole, you don't have to pay any tax.
Any tax. So,
none at all.
No, it's ridiculous.
So it's incentivizing people corporations to invest in advertisements on web giants as opposed to local companies. I would end that. That is wrong.
You would also, though, roll back big business corporate tax rates, right? From
2010 rates, yeah.
Yeah, from 15 to 18%. Are you not worried, again, looking at our neighbor who is, slashing taxes and trying to make things easier to bring businesses back to his country, are you not worried that that move would do the opposite, would push investment out of Canada?
Well, I look at...
What would you do to counter it?
Yeah, no, so I look at those decisions. It would be going back to 2010 rates. So it's not super dramatic. It's important, it's bold, but it's going back to rates that we've had before. But I look at the decisions that companies make to invest in a country. And there's a list of decisions and criteria. And certainly taxation is one, but it's certainly not anywhere near the top. The top reasons are stability of our government, stability of the country, educated workforce, social services, and we excel in all these. So I'm confident that we'd be able to retain and grow businesses in Canada with that rate.
Okay. I am personally unclear on where you sit on deficits, because you just not too long ago said you won't rack up more debt. Do you think that the Liberals' plan to have, for instance, a $27 billion deficit next year is acceptable?
So it's the way they've racked up this deficit. They've been investing in basically billionaires. They've been giving away billions of dollars to the wealthiest. I think that's wrong.
They've actually taxed the wealthiest in Canada.
They haven't. Effectively, 2017 Statistics Canada reports that the top 1% under Mr. Trudeau have paid less tax and have gained more wealth.
I'm asking what you're interested in terms of deficits. Are you going to go into deficit, or do you have a pledge for a balanced budget?
So my pledge is this: I would be very prudent and responsible with the resources I have. I wouldn't give away billions to billionaires. I would invest in people. I would increase revenues to pay for my programs, but I certainly wouldn't commit to any austerity. I would never cut programs. I would invest in programs. And I certainly would not give billions away to billionaires, so I'd increase revenues.
Where's the answer, though, to that question? Are you planning to balance the books, or are you going to also carry a deficit?
So I want to live within my means. I believe that's important. Canadians expect that. But I don't want to, I want to be very clear. I wouldn't be running a deficit like Mr. Trudeau to give away billions to billionaires, which is what he's been doing. And I certainly wouldn't cut services. So I would look at our financial situation and be prudent and responsible, but I would invest in programs that help people.
So again, just so we're all clear, you're willing to have some sort of deficit, just not as big as Mr. Trudeau?
I would do it for different reasons. So if it comes to a point where I have to make an investment and it means, going into deficit, I would only do that to develop and to deliver programs like childcare, universal health care, pharmacare, dental care, not to give a massive tax break to the wealthiest.
Okay. David, we're going to leave it there. Let's move on to our last voter.
Thanks.
My name is Farheen, and I live and work in downtown Toronto. I work in the financial services industry, and I'm Pakistani Canadian. I've been in Canada for 12 years. In my spare time, I volunteer with various organizations. I'm passionate about empowering women as well as working with marginalized communities. Historically, I've voted Liberal. However, for the past couple of years, I voted NDP. This year, I'm undecided, and I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for. I'm going to start with a positive. Sure. As a person of color, it makes me very happy and I'm very hopeful about Canadian politics to see you on this platform. Mm-hmm. I am an NDP supporter, so I align, and my value system aligns with the platform. Mm-hmm. Where I struggle with is with your leadership credentials. So we've seen that you've not been able to create momentum, you've not been able to galvanize the party, and that's shown up in the low fundraising numbers. There's debt within the party. We've seen high attrition rates. A lot of MPs have not come back to run. And we've seen that in the lower poll numbers. So how can I feel confident in your leadership that you'll be able to represent me, that you'll be able to represent all Canadians and execute on the vision that you've set out?
So there's a lot of different areas there I got to tackle. So I believe in Canadians wanting someone that's on their side. And then in terms of kind of where we're at, it took us some time to get there. But if you look at our candidates, I'm really proud of the fact that we worked hard. And we have 49% of our candidates are women. Right. It was a commitment for me. I wanted to make sure we changed the status quo, kind of the way things were done, the old boys club in Ottawa, which was mostly men. Right. And if we want to change that, we have to change it with our candidates. Right. So in a lot of examples, some of our veterans moved aside for young women to come up. Right. So in Victoria, we had a great MP, right. A lawyer, who stepped aside. And now in his place, the candidate is a young woman city councillor. And I'm proud of that. And he's proud of that.
That's a great story.
That's exciting.
But so 1/3 of MPs who ran in 2015 didn't come back to run in 2019. And a lot of people have said that you've not been able to bring your own party together. So how can we have faith in you to bring other parties together around the table?
Yeah, I can give you some more examples. So in Nathan Cullen, great champion who's not running again. Right. He stepped aside, and now the mayor of one of the largest cities in his riding is running. Right. And Nathan Cullen is still helping. And the new candidate, Taylor Backrack, is running. In Hamilton, we have an elderly man who's amazing. Dave Christopherson fought really hard, fought for most of his life as a city councillor, as an MPP, and then as an MP. Right. And he stepped aside now, and in his place is a young racialized man, Matt Green. Right. And so I'm proud of that. I think that's great. That shows renewing of the party. That shows excitement. Right. New people are coming up who are elected, who are passionate, and that's an exciting, and the veterans are still helping them out.
Right, so I hear a lot about diversity and inclusion within your party, which makes me really happy. However, I feel you said the right things, especially around the blackface scandal. I felt your message really resonated with me and a lot of other Canadians. So I think you showed really great leadership. However, when it comes to action, like for example, Bill 21, I felt you didn't have the courage to take action, that you really shied away from actually standing up. So again, that raises questions to me about your leadership.
I don't know if you saw the video yesterday, but my whole life
that was unfortunate.
But my whole life is an act of defiance to an idea of discriminating people. Mm-hmm. I go to Montreal, I go to Quebec. Right. No other leader can go there and have to face people calling them out for the way they look. Right. But I'm not afraid of that because I know many Canadians face that every day. People are told that they don't belong because of their gender. They're told because they don't belong because of the color of their skin or who they are, their sexuality. And I go into places and say, hey, I'm not just trying to become, I'm trying to become the prime minister of this country. And look, I got a beard and a turban, and I want to fight climate crisis, and I want to build a better country.
And
my presence on the political platform is an act of saying, hey, we don't have to divide people based on the way they look.
And I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. If I could just get in on the action piece, like, right, taking action on Bill 21. I'm not a lawyer, but I really want to know. I'm sure there's a federal government can do something to, influence that Bill 21.
Yeah, so right now there's a court challenge going on. And that court challenge is very important. I support the right to challenge it in court. And that decision is going to be very important. I don't want to interfere with that decision. But what I want to do is I want to win over the hearts and minds of people. I'm going to Quebec regularly. I'm going on TV regularly. Every question I get when I go to a scrum or when I'm interviewed in Quebec is about Bill 21. So I have to continue to say, hey, listen, clearly I'm against the bill. I don't believe I don't believe in politics that divide us. I don't believe in politics that discriminate people based on the way they look. And I want to win over the hearts and minds of people in Quebec, one person at a time, one interview at a time. I want to show people that we can build a better society when we work together.
Good job.
Yes.
I'll keep going if you want. Thanks, Farheen.
Thank you, Farheen.
They're all good, right?
Everyone
My
good.
job's in
Everyone-
jeopardy,
everyone
probably.
did good.
I was glad Farheen brought up the video that I'm sure if you haven't seen it, a man...
Yeah, I brought it up, actually.
Yeah, oh, you brought it up. Okay. Your reaction was, I'm not sure that I could react like that. So I wonder, do you ever get angry when those moments happen?
When I was a kid, I got angry a lot. Yeah, I had to put up with a lot of bullying, and I defended myself, and I was angry. As I grew older, though, my mom really taught me this idea that we're all one, we're all connected, and something that I really believe in is trying to find the shared humanity, even in moments where it's very difficult. It's kind of one of my spiritual practices, something that my mom really stressed, and it's something that I do. So even in a moment where someone's being really hurtful or very negative, I try to find the shared humanity and try to find a way to win them over.
Let me go back to Bill 21, because I think what Farheen was trying to get at is you have, all throughout this event here, you've talked about standing up for your principles. Obviously, your principles here are that this is not a good thing for Quebec. So why not at least allow the door to be open for federal action if needed?
Well, that's always going to be an option that remains open. There's a legal option for that. What I'm focusing on and saying is this. My focus is, one, there's a court challenge going on right now, and that court challenge is an important court challenge, and I don't want to interfere with that. What I want to do is I want to win over people. And I go to Quebec, I campaign in Quebec, I speak to people.
You're not going to overturn legislation, with all due respect. Just this morning, the Quebec minister said the law on secularism is part of the Quebec identity. So you might win them over one-on-one, but what are you willing to do legally to get rid of that?
I don't accept that that's the only way to tackle something. I believe that the way to tackle a problem is you go there where the problem's happening and you say, hey,
I know, but
I'm a guy with a beard.
It's a law, Mr.
Let me
Singh.
finish.
Yeah.
I'm a guy with a beard and a turban, and I want to fight to protect the environment. I believe in a woman's right to choose fiercely and firmly. I believe in the right to die with dignity. I believe in same-sex marriage. I believe in these things to my core.
Right.
And I'm in Quebec telling people, listen, this is not the way to go ahead. It doesn't make sense to determine someone's acceptability in society based on the way they look.
What would you demand in support of a minority government? Should you hold the balance of power? What is the issue for you that has to happen? What's the one thing?
Three things, I think. It's healthcare. I want to expand healthcare to include pharmacare for all in the dental care program. Electoral reform is crucial for me. I believe we need to have that, and that's proportional.
It's been rejected in British Columbia and other places.
Absolutely, I believe in it. The federal committee that was struck, that was a provincial referendum. The federal committee that was struck overwhelmingly said people believe in proportional representation. Mixed member is the form that I like, and I would push for that. I want to fight for the climate. I want to fight against the climate crisis and commit to that.
So you couldn't support a minority conservative government then?
No, and I've ruled that out. I've made that really clear for a number of reasons. They're not clear on a woman's right to choose. They don't understand the climate crisis. They're not even clear on LGBTQ communities' rights. For those reasons, I've said very clearly no, I would not support.
Would you do that on an issue-by-issue basis?
I believe in, so I have to frame it this way because I'm running to become Prime Minister. So if anyone wants to support me in implementing universal pharmacare, the daycare plan we have, the dental care plan we have, then I would take their support.
Let me end on the same question that I'm asking everybody, and that is, what is the quality, the one quality you personally have that would make you a good Prime Minister?
It's just that I've seen some of the struggles that people go through. I've lived them in my life, and I feel like it's enough of having governments in Ottawa that work for the rich, that work for the powerful. People need someone that's going to work for them. I'm not in it for the rich. I don't work for the powerful. I work for all of you, and I want to make your lives better, and I'm committed to doing that.
Okay. Mr. Singh, thank you. Thanks to our questioners, thanks to our audience, and of course to NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. If you want to catch up on our other conversations this week, Justin Trudeau, Andrew Scheer, Elizabeth May, you can find them on the CBC News app and on CBC Gem. One quick note again, Maxime Bernier initially declined our offer to participate. We have, though, invited him for an interview later in the campaign, if he likes. This is our final program in our face-to-face series. We really appreciate all of you who have watched, you've tweeted, you've emailed me. You all seem to have loved it. So that makes us very happy as your public broadcaster. I'm Rosemary Barton. Thanks again for watching. Have a good night. Thank you.